It may be some time before Scott Robertson is able to publicly tell his side of the story following his dramatic departure as All Blacks head coach, with growing belief that the former Crusaders boss has been legally prevented from speaking out as part of his severance agreement with New Zealand Rugby, NZR. Robertson, 51, was officially sacked midway through his 4-year contract after a postseason review into New Zealand's underwhelming 2025 international campaign. While the decision itself sent shockwaves through the rugby world, the manner of his exit and the silence that has followed has only deepened the controversy. Despite widespread criticism of performances and growing dissatisfaction within the All Blacks environment, Robertson's record on paper was far from disastrous. Across 2 seasons in charge, the All Blacks won 20 of their 27 tests, a 74% win rate that would ordinarily be considered acceptable, even strong, by most international standards. Yet, as has become increasingly clear, results alone did not tell the full story. Performance versus perception. While the All Blacks continued to win matches under Robertson, many of those victories lacked the authority, cohesion, and clarity traditionally associated with New Zealand rugby. There were flat attacking displays, defensive lapses, and a sense that the side was struggling to define a clear identity in the post-Ian Foster era. More damaging, however, were reports that began to surface following NZR's internal review. Reports suggesting that the real issues lay off the field, not on it. Speculation quickly emerged around player dissatisfaction, with suggestions that elements of the playing group had lost confidence in Robertson's leadership and the overall culture he was trying to build. Although NZR chairman David Kirk was quick to dismiss claims of a full-blown player revolt, he did acknowledge that feedback from within the squad played a role in the decision-making process. For many observers, that revelation alone marked a rare and uncomfortable moment in All Blacks history, a conspicuous silence since the news broke. Robertson has remained publicly silent. There have been no interviews, no press conferences, no carefully worded farewell statements. Only a brief and telling interaction with the media. New Zealand outlet Stuff reached out to Robertson, offering him the opportunity to share his perspective on the events that led to his sacking. The response they received was short, polite, and revealing. "I am sure you understand my position," Robertson replied via text message. What followed raised eyebrows across the rugby community. A zipper mouth emoji, a visual cue that many interpreted as confirmation that the former All Blacks coach is unable, rather than unwilling, to speak. That single emoji has since become a symbol of the uncertainty, secrecy, and unease surrounding Robertson's departure. Obvious Robertson has been gagged. The theory that Robertson has been legally silenced gained further traction following comments from veteran broadcaster and pundit Scotty Stevenson, who addressed the issue bluntly on Sport Nation. "I've heard some clowns demanding Scott Robertson front and be interviewed," Stevenson said. "I mean, it's obvious to me that a part of the severance and a part of this agreement, he's been gagged." Stevenson argued that the absence of Robertson's voice in the public domain is not accidental nor indicative of avoidance, but rather a reflection of contractual obligations imposed by NZR as part of the exit process. "So New Zealand Rugby get to front a press conference," he continued. The chairman of New Zealand Rugby fronts a press conference. Stevenson then revealed what he described as extraordinary behind-the-scenes details surrounding that announcement. "I'm led to believe that members of the senior executive of New Zealand Rugby had no idea what he was going to say in that press conference, by the way. A decision made in the shadows." Perhaps most alarming was Stevenson's claim regarding the level of secrecy surrounding the decision to sack Robertson. "I'm also led to believe that senior members of the All Blacks had no idea until half an hour before David Kirk fronted a press conference that they were sacking the coach," he said that, if accurate, those claims paint a picture of a decision taken at the very top of NZR, with minimal consultation and virtually no warning, even to those most directly affected. Now tell me how you get from "let's run a robust, fair review system" to the chairman of New Zealand Rugby standing up, essentially saying goodbye to Scott Robertson with so few people in the picture, Stevenson added. Assistant coaches didn't know. Such assertions have only fueled criticism of NZR's governance, communication processes, and transparency, particularly at a time when trust in the organization appears fragile. One voice aloud. Another silent Stevenson contrasted Robertson's enforced silence with NZR's freedom to shape the narrative. I wouldn't expect him to throw his toys, he said. But what I'm saying is there can only be one reason why Scott Robertson would not be fronting here. And that's because New Zealand Rugby have said it's the terms of your departure that you do not say anything. In Stevenson's view, the imbalance is stark. NZR gets to speak, explain, and justify its actions, while the man at the center of the storm is unable to respond. Tell me I'm wrong, he challenged. I'm prepared. If New Zealand Rugby want to say that that's not the case, then come and say it. Otherwise, I'm just going to make the assumption that that's part and parcel of what's happened here. As of now, NZR has not publicly denied that Robertson is subject to a non-disclosure agreement. Questions without answers beyond the issue of Robertson's silence. Stevenson raised further concerns about the review process itself, particularly around player involvement. I would love to know how many players were involved in this review, he said, because I'm going to say to you for a fact, it wasn't all of them. The suggestion that only a select group of players may have been consulted raises uncomfortable questions about representation, influence, and accountability within the squad. What questions were asked? Stevenson continued. And how now you've got the situation where your foremost rugby expert, the guy you contract to consult on rugby, says he saw good things about the coaches. Stevenson was referring to Wayne Smith, one of the most respected figures in New Zealand Rugby, who has previously been engaged by NZR in advisory roles. Smith's reported positive assessment of aspects of the coaching setup appears to conflict with the conclusions drawn by the board. Who really knows best? That contradiction led Stevenson to a pointed and controversial conclusion. But David Kirk, the chairman of New Zealand Rugby, a man who hasn't played the game in 3.5 decades, seems to know more about that than Wayne Smith. The remark encapsulated a growing frustration among fans and pundits alike, the sense that rugby decisions at the highest level are being driven more by corporate governance than rugby expertise. While Kirk is a former All Black and Rugby World Cup winner, his playing career ended in the late 1980s, long before the professional era transformed the sport. Critics argue that modern Test rugby requires deep, current technical understanding, something they believe should carry more weight in decisions of this magnitude, that a legacy left unfinished for Robertson. The manner of his departure threatens to overshadow what was once seen as a promising beginning. After dominating Super Rugby with the Crusaders, he arrived at the All Blacks job hailed as the man to modernize the team, reconnect with players, and usher in a new era. Instead, his tenure ended abruptly, clouded by allegations of cultural issues and unresolved questions. Without the opportunity to publicly reflect, defend his methods, or acknowledge mistakes, Robertson's legacy remains incomplete. Defined more by what others say about him than by his own words. Silence that speaks volumes in elite sport. Silence is often louder than explanation. Robertson's zipped mouth emoji may ultimately prove to be the most honest indication of the reality behind his exit. Whether he will ever be allowed or willing to speak openly remains unclear. Severance agreements can expire, non-disclosure clauses can lapse, and time can soften hardened positions. But for now, the former All Blacks coach remains sidelined, not just from the job he loved, but from the conversation surrounding it, a defining moment for NZ Rugby for New Zealand Rugby. The handling of Robertson's departure could prove just as significant as the decision itself. As the organization prepares to appoint a new head coach and navigate a crucial period leading into Rugby World Cup 2027, questions around transparency, governance, and trust will not simply fade away. Fans want answers. Former players want accountability. And the rugby world is watching closely. Until Scott Robertson is able to speak freely, those answers will remain incomplete, and the sense of unfinished business will continue to hang over the All Blacks. In the meantime, one thing is clear. This is not just the end of a coaching chapter. It is a moment that may come to define how New Zealand rugby is run in the modern era.